December 7th, Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day. A gaunt, trembling old man in a faded military jacket stands before the National Veterans Memorial. His eyes glisten with memories of battles long past. But a security guard snarls, "You don't belong here, old man." The surrounding crowd titters. Some turn away. No one speaks up. Why would a soldier who bled for his country be humiliated right outside the shrine built to honor him? The story of James "Jim" Thompson, an 87-year-old veteran, will bring you to tears, ignite your outrage, and ultimately restore your faith that justice still exists. His journey is not just a soldier's story. It's a reminder that honor must never be allowed to fade. Join us as we uncover the moment that changed everything, when a 4-star general walked in and flipped the script. Hit that subscribe button now, so you won't miss the next chapters of this story. James "Jim" Thompson opened his eyes in the dim light of an early December morning. The entire city of Honolulu still lay half asleep beneath a thin veil of mist. His small apartment by the shoreline held only a single bed, an old wooden table, and a few black and white photographs from his youth. Dawn's scattered rays slipped through the partially drawn curtains, illuminating the deep lines etched on his weathered face. At 87 years old, his hands trembled each time he closed his eyes. His thick glasses rested beside a cup of black coffee on the table. Each heartbeat reminded him that one important journey still awaited. Silently, Jim sat up. He felt every stiff muscle and creaking joint as he focused on his breath. The strains of "Anchors Away" echoed in his mind, transporting him back to 1952, when barely 22, he first donned the U.S. uniform and left the San Diego pier for Korea, his heart brimming with excitement and a touch of anxiety. He had crossed icy fields, endured fire and gunshots, and carried memories he would never forget. But today, those memories would join millions of others at the National Veterans Memorial's Remembrance Day. On the small table, Jim carefully set out his scuffed black combat boots. With a soft cloth and polish, he buffed each scratch as if tending to a sacred relic. He smoothed the back of his khaki jacket, despite the silvered medallions on his chest that testified to the passage of time. The Bronze Star, awarded for bravery during the 1968 Vietnam campaign, gleamed under the pale light. Slowly, Jim detached its frame. He stroked its surface, then pinned it to his jacket over his heart, a silent declaration that after nearly 9 decades, he still bore pride in every wound, every sacrifice. A gentle knock sounded at the door. Emily, his only nearby granddaughter, asked softly, "Are you ready, Grandpa?" Jim merely curved his lips into a wry smile, his gaze distant. He refused her offer, not because he didn't need help, but because some journeys must be taken alone. He had told himself that while holding the folded flag, the sole memento of his brother who fell in World War II, vowing to bring it to the most honorable place, even if he stood there by himself. Emily bowed her head, tears glistening in her eyes, and quietly closed the door behind him. Stepping outside, Jim pinned an eagle-shaped lapel pin, the symbol of America and of the Marine Corps, to his jacket. Each step along the red brick street was slow but sure, heading toward the bus stop just a few blocks away. The rare warmth of a winter morning did little to still the sea breeze. It cut through his thin jacket with a harsh whisper. Jim breathed steadily. His eyes followed a dewdrop clinging to a tamarind leaf. He imagined himself aboard a helicopter bound for an island, eyes set on his objective. The first bus carried him to the city center, where modern skyscrapers mingled with historic streets. Jim waited, bent slightly against the railing, the flag pressed neatly in his arms. The driver met his gaze with respect and a nod. Along the route, Jim listened to the wheels humming on asphalt, the harbor's distant horn, and the creak of the bus door as it closed. Each sound stirred a fragment of memory. The alarm's shriek as B-29s soared off the flying fortress, the call of comrades through smoke and flame, the faint strains of the national anthem at a nighttime encampment. 3 bus lines, 2 transfers, 1 subway ride later, Jim arrived at the marble steps leading to the National Veterans Memorial. Before him stood gleaming white staircases. Above, a broad banner proclaimed in bold letters, "Honoring those who served." Those words spoke not only to Jim, but to more than 6 million American veterans, to the fallen, and to the silent pain residing in every family's heart. Jim paused, inhaling deeply. The chill stung his nostrils, bringing tears to his eyes. He tugged his cap lower, shielding himself from the weak sunlight. Slowly, he ascended, eyes fixed forward, unhurried. Each step was gratitude, each footfall a triumphant chorus of pride. Passing through the heavy glass doors, Jim entered another world, where time seemed to stand still. Endless galleries displayed rifles, battle maps, and hastily written letters sent home. The only sounds were footsteps on carpet and the steady breaths of a few visitors. Jim reached the first exhibit, a large photograph of USS Arizona sinking on December 7, 1941. His gaze lingered on the sailors clinging to the deck, their brave smiles frozen before fate struck. Jim bowed his head, silently saluting those comrades who never returned. Next, he entered the Korean War Gallery. Helmets cracked and uniforms faded. Worn rubber-soled boots recaptured the harshest chapter of his service. Jim remembered his first night in the trench, artillery thunder rolling in the distance. He realized then that courage was more than eager trigger pulls. It was enduring fear and preserving spirit in the bleakest conditions. He stopped before an old communications radio, its iron case stamped "Property of USMC." Jim recalled trudging under deep snow, carrying that very device over each ridge to stay in contact with headquarters. The crackle of static, the moment he learned a comrade was hit. His heart had clenched. He brushed away an unexpected tear, drew a deep breath, and moved on. The final gallery focused on the Vietnam campaign. Soft yellow lights revealed a miniature Vietnam map, marked with the paths his unit once marched. Slow-motion images of Marines touching down by helicopter in dense jungle, bomb blasts destroying bridges. Jim stood motionless, the air seeming to squeeze his chest. He wondered how many sacrifices his youth had cost, how many stories remained untold. Yet, amid the solemnity, a surge of pride filled him, because regardless of cost, they had served for a shared ideal: freedom, comradeship, and country. Emerging into the main hall, Jim gazed up at the statue of a sentinel, saluting toward the horizon. The American flag fluttered high against the sky. He placed his hand on his chest, bowed his head once more. The old soldier's figure emerged into the morning light. Jim and his folded flag stood as living proof of courage and devotion's eternal legacy. On his way home, Jim took his time. He admired the cityscape, rows of swaying palms, red-tiled roofs, and the distant glimmer of the sea. Each slow, steady step carried the anthem of aging veterans, of hearts that never yield. And when Jim crossed back into his small apartment, he knew he had completed a sacred mission, a journey of remembrance, of gratitude, and a solemn reminder that freedom is never guaranteed. A steady stream of people moved forward in line before the National Veterans Memorial's entrance. They flowed into the bustling rhythm of a winter morning. Weak sunlight filtered through the eucalyptus leaves lining the path. It caught on the free admission tickets glinting in the hands of young veterans still clad in uniform. Laughter rang out eagerly. Some showed off their medals. Others exchanged greetings after years apart. A few faces lit up in joyous reunion. The air felt so bright that it was hard to imagine the hardship behind each uniform, the silent sacrifices only fellow soldiers truly understood. At the end of the line stood James Jim Thompson, his back slightly hunched after 90 years carrying heavy burdens. His khaki jacket had faded, its buttons misshapen by time. Beneath it, he wore the warm coat he'd purchased only weeks ago. His eyes remained bright, though his weathered face bore deep wrinkles. He carried a folded flag carefully tucked under his arm, his fingers trembling around it, yet his steps remained steady, neither rushed nor slow. Ahead lay the security desk, a young man of about 20, hair closely cropped, his dark green jacket crisp on the shoulders. He held a stack of veteran ID cards and the list of those entitled to free admission. His professional manner at times bordered on cold. As Jim approached, he gently placed the folded flag on the counter. He stroked its edge affectionately. "Good morning, son," his warm voice offered, a small smile playing on his lips. But Jim fell silent as the guard kept his eyes fixed on the computer screen. "I need ID," the guard replied curtly, his gaze never wavering. A cold draft blew in through the door, raising the fine hairs on Jim's neck. Jim smiled softly, his tone still kind. "I served in Korea and Vietnam." His hands shook as he withdrew a faded photograph from his pocket. It captured a heroic day long past. A young soldier standing with his comrades, resolve shining in his eyes before deployment. The guard glanced at the photo. His eyes glided over it as if he'd seen too many similar images. He shrugged. "Could be anyone. No ID, no entry. Rules are rules." A gentle chime sounded as the glass doors slid open, admitting a group of young veterans. They flashed their cards, received friendly nods, and soon disappeared into the grand foyer. Tears welled in Jim's eyes, yet he made no complaint. He inhaled deeply, savoring the mingled scent of oak wood and memory in the air. The folded flag, his brother's sole memento, the Marine who fell in 1945, felt more sacred than ever. He pressed it to his chest, as if it could shelter his memories. Across the street, a well-dressed woman in an expensive wool coat leaned against a lamppost. Her eyes narrowed in disdain. She whispered into her phone, then shook her head. "Another homeless person trying to sneak in for freebies," she muttered, just loud enough for nearby onlookers to hear. A few chuckled. Some turned away in agreement. Others sighed as they spoke to colleagues. "It's the same every time. This museum doesn't check thoroughly." Jim showed no sign of offense. He stood quietly amidst the morning bustle, a lone figure unmoved by judgment. In his aged heart, he knew he needed no one's approval. His past bore wounds indelible, yet filled him with pride in his service. He recalled the snowfall on Korea's highlands, when thousands of GIs braced on ice to hold their positions, the crack of gunfire at night on the Quang Tri plains, as ammo trucks blazed into the darkness. Those memories could not be erased, no matter how skeptically someone glanced at a blurry photograph. A bus pulled up nearby, its horn giving a soft toot as new passengers disembarked. Jim watched the eager veterans step off, backpacks in one hand, small flags in the other. They chatted excitedly, waving to old friends. In their eyes, Jim saw admiration and respect. They knew something of those who came before, but could never fathom the full measure of wartime pain and faith. Suddenly, a surge of strength rose within him. He inhaled, closed his eyes, imagined himself once more in the dark blue uniform of youth. A cold breeze brushed his shoulders, as if whisking him back to a coastal valley. He heard the radio man call his code, the helicopter's thrum delivering supplies to the front lines. Then the call. "Thompson! Thompson!" urging him onward, undaunted by bomb or bullet. Opening his eyes, Jim found himself still before the museum gates. He offered a slight nod to the guard, though still barred from entry. "Thank you for listening," he whispered, even though the guard did not turn. Slowly, Jim began to step away. His movement halted the woman across the street mid-scoff. She lowered her phone, watched him intently. Her disdain softened into something like regret. Jim walked on, spine straight, the folded flag cradled to his chest. Each measured step carried the weight of history. Through the museum window, he glimpsed the gleaming marble steps and the sign, "Honoring those who served," waiting for his return on another day when all would be in order. On his way back, he strolled along the red brick lane, dappled sunlight dancing through the leaves. A distant church bell tolled, marking the beat of remembrance. Jim lifted the flag, gazed at the pale blue sky. A sea breeze whispered by, carrying the salt of unshed tears. He knew that tomorrow, or the day after, he would return, with proper papers in hand, ready to pass through those gates like any other soldier. And then, every gaze would be one of respect, greeting a life devoted to service. In Jim's heart, this journey was never just about entering a museum. It was a hymn to courage, a reminder of freedom's value and sacrifice. It was how he honored his brother, stood proud of his past, and affirmed that, no matter the obstacle, the old soldier would always carry on. As his silhouette faded, the folded flag stood tall, a living testament to the undying power of patriotism and reverence for history. A solemn ceremony continued inside the main auditorium of the National Veterans Memorial. Glittering spotlights illuminated the museum director's polished suit and the rows of crimson velvet seats filled with honored guests. Atop the dais, the dignified director's deep, warm voice intoned speeches on sacrifice and duty, stressing the importance of honoring those who placed country above self. Below, the audience erupted in thunderous applause after each emphatic line. Beside the podium, a children's choir in spotless white uniforms raised their voices in patriotic songs, their voices echoing as a tribute to courageous hearts. A large screen displayed images of young, fit veterans recounting their exploits, from the red sands of the Middle East to the jungles of Southeast Asia, filling the hall with the heroic breath of history. In that dazzling moment, James Jim Thompson, who had served as a private in the 38th Infantry Regiment in Korea and later in Special Forces in Vietnam, was nowhere to be seen among the throng. He did not cross the grand doors into the prestigious ceremony. Instead, he sat alone on a cold bench outside the museum, where an east wind slipped through the stone cracks, causing his faded khaki coat to tremble. The folded flag, the only relic left from his brother who fell in Korea in 1951, rested tightly against his chest, as though embracing the whole of his family's history in its worn folds. Jim lifted his eyes to the fogged glass. He watched the ceremony inside, blinding lights, unceasing applause, the radiant faces of the elite guests, and his heart sank with an unspeakable sorrow, not because he felt unworthy, but because today's celebrated veterans were the glamorous, triumphant versions curated for a media festival. They wore crisp uniforms, gleaming medals, smiled for reporters and family members, while old soldiers like Jim, with bodies worn by time, failing eyesight, ringing ears, and hearts heavy with painful memories, were forgotten out there on that solitary bench, silently awaiting the next bus back to their humble homes. The bench behind the side gate, where few paid attention, had become a makeshift refuge for countless untold stories of those who once bore arms for freedom. Jim placed the folded flag solemnly on his knee, stroking it gently as if soothing a child. In his heart, the flag was more than cloth. It was a promise to preserve the value of liberty for future generations. He remembered his brother, the one who had trudged with him through nights of shelling under the Nashville spring, then vanished without a trace on the slopes of Kaesong. The memory of his brother's eager, hopeful face choked Jim with emotion. He held no bitterness, only sorrow that society seemed to have forgotten stories like his, lives fading into obscurity. Not far away, in the Federal Veterans Affairs Building, Colonel Rachel Carter strode down a corridor long as gray silk. Once a top cadet at West Point, and over 20 years a veteran of Middle Eastern theaters, she could not tolerate injustice, especially against aging soldiers who risked everything for their country. Her combat boots clicked decisively on marble, sounding like a wake-up call to anyone neglecting their duty. Reaching General David Marshall's office, Rachel knocked firmly. From inside came the general's resonant voice. "Come in." The office held a massive wooden desk strewn with battlefield dossiers, a grand portrait of the Paracel and Spratly Islands on the wall, and a glass case displaying the distinguished insignia and medals General Marshall had worn through his campaigns. In that moment, Rachel felt the weight of her mission. She was not there to discuss administration, but to bear the plight of forgotten veterans. She began her report. Right now, outside the National Veterans Memorial, a venerable American veteran named James Thompson was being denied entry to an honor ceremony, simply for lack of valid ID. She described him sitting quietly on the stone bench, his faded coat, the folded flag held fast to his chest, and the disdainful glances from passers-by. She emphasized the guard's indifference and the scorn of well-dressed onlookers who presumed him a beggar seeking a free ticket. Each detail made General Marshall's face grow grave with concern. He asked softly, "What is his name?" Rachel replied gently, "James Thompson, 38th Infantry Regiment, Korea, Special Forces, Vietnam. He received the Bronze Star and Purple Heart." She placed before General Marshall a thick dossier, along with black and white photographs, commendations, and letters of praise from former commanders. He studied the file, turning each page slowly. His gaze lingered on a photo of Jim helping a wounded comrade across a trench at Incheon. In that silence, he realized the debt he owed that soldier. It was Jim Thompson who had saved his father from the blast of artillery fire, giving his father a chance to live and to father him. "General Ma," Marshall's voice trembled as he uttered the old soldier's name. "Jim Thompson." The name passed like a chill wind through the office. He rose to his feet, shoulders squared, eyes ablaze with resolve. He ordered, "Cancel all unnecessary meetings. Arrange transport immediately. We're going now." The command rang like a battle alarm, and Rachel felt justice spring back to life. Within minutes, a convoy of polished military vehicles rolled through Washington, D.C., heading straight for the National Veterans Memorial. In the back of the government SUV, Rachel sat beside General Marshall, clutching the dossier and Jim's old photograph. She opened her notebook to note crucial details, preparing for the apology and special tribute about to unfold. General Marshall gazed out the window at the fading afternoon light, then turned to Rachel. "We will personally welcome him, so Jim Thompson knows that America never forgets its debts." Far off, Jim still sat in silence. The cold wind brushed his aged frame as his eyes gazed into the distance. Then the hum of an engine and headlights swept in from the side gate, where two uniformed officers approached with an SUV draped in the American flag. Jim bowed his head slightly, then looked up in wonder. As the SUV doors opened, General Marshall and Rachel Carter stepped out, advancing toward him with respect and reverence. The folded flag in Jim's hands seemed to shine anew. In that moment, his lifetime of disappointment faded away, replaced by the undying pride he had so long deserved. A convoy of sleek black SUVs glided down the boulevard leading to the National Veterans Memorial. Their flashing lights painted the street corners red, though no sirens wailed. Each vehicle bore a government seal and a fluttering American flag etched on its door, a clear signal that something important was underway. When the last SUV rolled to a stop at the front entrance, doors swung open, and General David Marshall stepped out, his uniform pressed to perfection, the 4 stars gleaming on his shoulders like badges of justice and authority. His appearance instantly drew every eye in the grand hall and beyond, turning toward the legendary general. Inside the main hall, the remembrance ceremony continued with solemn rituals. The children's choir resumed, "Anchors Away," while the museum director, clad in a glossy black suit, read on from his speech about soldiers' spirit of sacrifice and duty. Stage lights danced on the white marble floor, reflecting rows of attentive guests, applauding each time the director punctuated a key phrase. That glittering atmosphere shattered the moment heavy-soled boots echoed decisively on stone. General Marshall strode into the hall without hesitation, shoulders squared, chest forward, his gaze fixed on the guard by the ticket desk. The young soldier in dark green uniform, ID scanner at his belt, froze upon seeing the general approach, his face drained of color, speechless, as if he'd committed a grave offense. General Marshall halted before him, voice cold as steel. "Where is he?" No courtesy title needed. His authority brooked no refusal. Every pair of eyes in the hall stilled, all fixed on the general as he raised a rigid finger, pointing toward the exit. The guard's lips parted at last. I escorted him out, sir. An old man without valid ID. He doesn't belong here." His words rang out against the hush, causing a collective gasp. The general's tone grew even sterner as he repeated the guard's words, dripping with contempt. "He doesn't belong here? You just declared a Medal of Honor candidate doesn't belong here?" Silence settled like a verdict. Reporters' cameras swiveled toward the general, capturing every angle of his battle-scarred face, as if to record each moment of his unyielding dignity. The museum director in his dark suit rushed forward, panic in his voice. "Sir, there must be a misunderstanding." He was cut off by General Marshall's icy interruption. "Misunderstanding? You let your staff insult a hero at the very door of the shrine you're hosting?" His words reverberated through the hall, the stone columns and memorial statues trembling in the wake of his rebuke. Seizing the moment, General Marshall addressed the entire audience, his voice firm yet laced with authority. "James Thompson saved my father from a burning tank at Incheon. Amid shell fire, he braved enemy fire to pull my father from the turret. My family owes him everything. And you," He pointed at the guard. Dared say he doesn't deserve to stand here? His declaration struck the marble floor like a hammer, leaving the hall suffocated by stunned silence. Guests, senior officials and retired soldiers alike, rose in unison. Some covered their mouths, eyes glistening with shame and emotion at the insult to justice. Reporters snapped away, recording every expression on General Marshall's face and the guard's stunned reaction. The moment beamed live to millions across America. Colonel Rachel Carter, who had alerted the general, stepped quietly to his side. She whispered fresh instructions. He nodded, then signaled to his aides, "Locate Mr. Thompson immediately. Prepare an official tribute for him right here." His command rang out like a clarion call, elevating the ceremony's gravity. Moments later, museum staff and security personnel reset the scene. The trembling guard was escorted from the ceremonial area. General Marshall and Colonel Carter strode outside. Guests and reporters poured through the main doors, glancing toward the stone bench where Jim had waited. The elderly man in his faded coat, eyes reddened by wind and unshed tears, rose as the military convoy approached. The lead SUV halted before the bench. Doors opened. General Marshall stepped out first, his 4-star insignia still gleaming, followed by Rachel Carter. They advanced on Jim with solemn respect. Before he could steady himself, the legendary general extended his arm in welcome. "Mr. Thompson, please, come in." His voice carried across the cobblestone walkway, drawing every onlooker's attention, visitors, staff, soldiers, and journalists alike. Jim rose slowly, hands trembling as he handed the folded flag to General Marshall. He bowed his head respectfully, voice quavering, "Sir, But General Marshall cut him off, placing a firm hand on Jim's shoulder. "No more words, Jim. You did everything for your comrades and country. This belated thank you is but a small token." Thunderous applause erupted, blending with the salute horns of the military vehicles and cheers of hopeful onlookers. Realizing the turn of events, the museum director hurried forward, bowing deeply to Jim and General Marshall, then requested to stand under the "Honoring Those Who Served" banner, presenting Jim with a Medal of Honor card and the museum's commemorative medal. Jim, eyes brimming with tears at the swift shift from rejection to reverence, offered a gentle smile. He raised the card, studying the engraved insignia, a testament to a lifetime of service. In that moment, the afternoon sky brightened. Golden rays filtered through the trees, illuminating the stars and stripes atop the flagpole before the museum. The image of Jim Thompson, an aged veteran clutching a folded flag, flanked by General Marshall and Rachel Carter, became a living symbol of courage, justice, and timely recognition. Applause and camera shutters clicked in perfect harmony, capturing the historic moment when justice finally found its rightful recipient, and the American spirit, both glorious and poignant, was celebrated in full. In the vast plaza before the National Veterans Memorial's entrance, the stillness of the space was suddenly enlivened by the season's first snowfall. Jim Thompson remained motionless on the granite bench, his trembling hands clutching the folded flag, the sole memento of his brother who fell in the brutal Korean conflict. The dim light of the winter afternoon filtered through the flakes, dusting his shoulders in white, as if blending him into this contemplative landscape. Around him, only the whisper of wind stirring leaves across the marble and the soft footfalls of sentries broke the silence. Then, from the left entrance, measured footsteps rang out. Jim looked up to see a young officer, erect and steadfast, advancing in a crisp uniform. He halted before Jim, executed a perfect salute, and bowed respectfully. "Mr. Thompson." General Marshall requests your immediate presence. Jim's eyes widened in surprise. General Marshall, he echoed, his voice a soft whisper in the chilly air. He folded the flag neatly in his lap, then rose slowly, his aged legs moving not away, but forward toward the lights, and genuine gratitude awaiting him. Beneath his knees, joints creaked, but his heart raced with exhilaration. They crossed the snow-dusted square toward the main entrance, where rows of black SUVs stood in pristine formation. Their headlights flashed slender beams across the white ground. A crowd of officials, young veterans, reporters, and guests pressed against the metal railings, eyes bright with anticipation, as though awaiting a marvel. As Jim and the officer neared, the scene shifted. Behind the glass doors, a figure in dark blue uniform, 4 stars gleaming on his shoulders, emerged with solemn grace. It was General David Marshall. He strode toward Jim, face warm, steps confident, offering a gentle smile. "Sergeant Thompson," he called, his voice a comforting warmth in the cold air. "I am David Marshall, son of First Lieutenant Robert Marshall, 38th Infantry Regiment, September 14th, 1950. In that silent moment, Jim drew breath. His gaze met the general's 4 stars. Realization dawned. This was the very son he had saved nearly 7 decades before amid the thunder of Incheon's bombardment. Joy and pride surged in his heart. "Little Bobby," Jim whispered, voice thick with emotion, "your father must be so proud of those stars." All around them, people saluted. Uniformed soldiers cried, "At ease, General," touching their insignia. Civilians, old and young, placed hands over hearts and bowed. The click of boots on marble echoed the solemnity of this recognition. Honoring a true hero, not empty words. General Marshall gently clasped Jim's frail arm, guiding him toward the steps of the dais. "We have unfinished business, Sergeant," he said, solemn but comradeship lacing his tone. "This ceremony lacks its most honored guest." Jim glanced at the doors. The same doors where guard and director had once barred him, now thrown wide in invitation. All eyes followed their approach. The guard at the ticket desk bowed his head, ashamed. The museum director in his fine suit hurried forward, stammering apologies, but General Marshall motioned for silence. He raised his hand, beckoning the crowd back, and had the stage lights focused on the dais. The space fell hushed. "Please listen to a genuine veteran," General Marshall began, his voice resonant throughout the plaza. "James Thompson carried arms to protect us. He saved comrades. He sacrificed his youth so future generations might live free. Today is more than an abstract commemoration of veterans. It is the formal tribute to the man who placed nation above self." His words flowed like balm across old wounds. Jim ascended the dais, flag still held close. The soft golden lights bathed his lined face, highlighting the venerable soldier now welcomed. He paused on the marble, eyes lifting to the crowd, a faint smile on his lips. Behind him, the banner proclaimed, "Honoring those who served," its bold letters standing out against deep crimson. The museum director stepped forward with a microphone, voice trembling but sincere. "Ladies and gentlemen, today we are honored to host Sergeant James Thompson, veteran of the 38th Infantry in Korea and Special Forces in Vietnam, recipient of the Bronze Star and Purple Heart. Please join me in giving him our warmest applause." Thunderous clapping rolled like waves against the vaulted ceiling, uplifting the steadfast heart of the old soldier. In that moment, Jim felt the lifeblood of service surge anew. He placed a hand on his chest, closed his eyes to remember his brother and the comrades left on distant fields. Then, opening his eyes, he met the camera lenses of reporters, nodded gently, eyes moist yet filled with pride, a nod to the nation's enduring gratitude. As the ceremony concluded, snow continued to drift outside. Jim descended the steps alongside General Marshall and Colonel Carter. Escorts guided him toward the waiting vehicles. The folded flag on his chest reaffirmed one truth: a soldier's dignity never fades. He boarded the SUV, doors closed softly. The convoy rolled away, carrying the image of a once anonymous life now fully honored. Under the SUV's dim headlights, snowflakes settled like a pure white veil upon its silver hood. Jim gazed through the window at the onlookers lingering to watch the procession. A rare sight. Americans, military and civilian alike, pausing to offer their genuine thanks to a truly deserving man. In Jim's heart, pride and peace intertwined, composing the final anthem of a soldier's life, where true values are not merely recounted but lived on, inspiring generations yet to come. The next morning, the story of James Jim Thompson ignited like wildfire across America. From major news websites to cable morning shows, footage of the legendary General David Marshall overpowering the guard to defend an elderly veteran's honor, and of Jim being escorted into the ceremony as a guest of honor, became a viral sensation. On YouTube, TikTok, and Facebook, millions of views and tens of thousands of shares flooded in, with emotionally charged comments. Major outlets ran headlines such as, "A moment of justice for the forgotten," "Compassionate veteran or a test of conscience," and "Homeless old man or lost hero." Within 48 hours, the museum director, who had witnessed the incident in the main hall, sent a brief resignation letter. In it, he acknowledged failures in admission policy and publicly apologized to millions of viewers. The guard who refused Jim was reassigned, accompanied by a formal apology before all museum staff. Most notably, the National Veterans Memorial immediately reformed its policy. From now on, any veteran is welcomed with compassion, no ID required. The sign, "Free Admission for Veterans," was replaced by "A Community of Gratitude," alongside an icon of a hand clasping a flag. Amid this wave of support, Jim became the nation's focal point, yet remained astonishingly humble. Dozens of reporters invited him for interviews, even to meet legislators in Washington, D.C. But Jim agreed only to a few small local station appearances. He would say simply, "I'm not special. Thousands like me are still out there, waiting, and no one looks our way." Those few words sparked deep admiration. Veteran organizations received nationwide donations. A California high school invited Jim to speak on service. A New York history program named him Veteran Professor. And the Vietnam War Heritage Society asked him to guest speak at its commemoration. But the most profound tribute appeared within the museum itself. A new exhibit entitled "Forgotten Warriors" was unveiled. This vast space honored veterans whose lives were neither glamorous nor decked in gleaming medals, yet who sacrificed quietly. At its center stood a cedar bench by the entrance, its backrest engraved in bronze. "For those who served." By unspoken tradition, if any veteran stood nearby, others would not sit, reserving the seat for anyone in need of rest. Every Sunday afternoon, Jim appeared there. He carried his folded flag, sat against the bench amid the glow of dusk. Sometimes he spoke with curious young visitors, guiding them through photos and artifacts. He told of frozen trenches in Korea, of sunlit yet bomb-filled afternoons in Vietnam, and of the perilous Incheon landing when he saved General Marshall's father. His stories were neither long nor ornate, but brimming with faith and camaraderie. When no one approached, Jim simply sat, gazing at the folded flag, life's most tender keepsake. The cold wind stirred the trees before the museum, rustling like a background score to silent memories. Some young soldier, laden with a heavy pack, would pause at the bench, or a history student would bow her head, eyes filled with respect. Then Jim would nod gently, inviting them to sit and share the serene space scented with cedar and melting snow. Those Sunday gatherings soon became iconic images online. The sight of the dignified veteran on the wooden bench, against a backdrop listing the names of unsung soldiers, circulated with hashtags Forgotten Warriors and #ThankYouJim. Thousands expressed a desire to visit the museum, not just to see exhibits, but to meet a living piece of history and hear stories of silent battles. Through Jim's story, America realized honor does not lie in flashy appearances, nor in credentials or shiny medals, but in quiet struggles and the steadfast hearts of those who bore arms. Veterans like Jim ceased to be homeless old men or publicity experiments, becoming living witnesses to freedom's true cost and sacrifice. And here's the call to action. Share this story with friends and family. Take a moment to call or write a note of thanks to the veterans around you, your father, grandfather, or an elderly neighbor. Honor them with small gestures. Offer your seat, listen to their tale, or simply extend a warm handshake. For you never know the battles a person has fought just by looking at them. If you'd like more inspiring stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you won't miss the next video. Together, we ensure no veteran is ever forgotten, because justice isn't a moment. It's an enduring commitment to those who served.